Hi, everyone, and welcome to Outside of the Box. And today I have a very special guest. I have Jamison Go from Sawblaze. It's time for Slash and Burn. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm ready to slash and burn. Well, not
That's
on not the podcast itself, but we're going to talk about some hot topics, I'm sure.
yes, I'm sure that we will. And I'm repping Sawblaze today. So yeah, it's so Sawblaze is one of my favorite robots. Like ever since 2018, just that hasn't changed. It's an amazing robot. So I'm just excited to talk about it. And so the funny thing about the beginning of last season is that since 2018, Sawblaze and Minotaur have been my two favorite robots. And watching Sawblaze and Minotaur fight is like asking me to choose between pizza and tacos. And naturally, I'm going to choose taco pizza, but there is no such thing as Toro Blaze, so I can't have that in BattleBots.
Hold on.
Um,
What about a pizza taco? Hold on a second.
Sure, that is another possibility. Um, but yeah, so it's so funny because I noticed rewatching it that literally the title of the first episode of last season was Slash and Burn. And it makes me feel like the people putting the show together were like, Sawblaze is gonna have an epic season. They just knew. Uh, you know, I know that durability is really the name of the game in BattleBots. I've heard it repeatedly from the builders, and it seems like you put a lot of effort into that in the off season before the last season. In that match, in the first 20 seconds or so, they got some shots in. So at the very beginning, it seemed like the fight that maybe I expected, and then unfortunately they ended up on top of Sawblaze, and I mean, not too long after that they were on fire. And I think that the interesting thing about that match is if it's really just about any robot other than Minotaur, I don't think it goes to a judge's decision. But it did, even though they were on fire the whole time, and it was just a really great match. So kind of talk about that and like your strategy going into it with such a great robot and a great driver in Daniel Freitas. And I mean, obviously you're also a really great driver, so it could have gone either way.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start all the way at the top. So, Sawblaze and Minotaur actually have an amazing history, and this starts from one of our team members on Sawblaze, the original five members. In particular, Joao is a former member of RioBots. He was on RioBots, and then he came to the U.S. for MIT, which is how he met all of us. And so when we decided to go for this BattleBots venture, of course, we knew of him and we wanted him to be a part of our team to bring all the experience that he has in combat robotics. I know for a long time he's been saying like, oh, like when Minotaur's on the scene, like Sawblaze versus Minotaur, and like we're gonna make him choose and everything because he's because he's got his ties to his basically his best friends and stuff. And uh, for this season, he is actually starting his professorship, so he wasn't actually there. But as soon as we got the matchup announcement, we of course we had to go back and forth. We're just like, ah, draw. Which one are you gonna pick? You pick Realbots, you pick Sawblaze, and so this is kind of like a matchup that we knew could probably happen eventually, and it was a lot of fun just to banter with those guys. The Realbots team are a fantastic team, very friendly, very sportsmanlike, and so we really go into that fight feeling a lot like friends and less like rivals. We know we're both really good robots. We know that win or lose, it's not going to be actually kind of bad for us. So we try to give it the best fight we can. Durability, yes, durability was the name of the game. Minotaur is known for being incredibly destructive, and so weathering those big hits is a important goal. And it's not just for them; it's for every robot, really. So in terms of durability, things that were fully demonstrated in this fight. This is a fantastic example for the durability of the robot and the improvements we made. is the forks, the fork construction, which we had done as a semi-aesthetic uh, design in previous seasons. Season 5 was a multi-part, maybe like 4 or 5 pieces weldment, and it had a sort of a look to it. It had some sweeps on it. It looked cool. It was those features were combat-wise unnecessary, but they're done for the aesthetics, and those aesthetics, of course, you can find in the toy. They look pretty cool. Season 6 fork was a aesthetically reduced version. It was for the core part of the fork, one giant piece of AR 500. It's just one thick piece, two-dimensional cut, and we added some barbs onto it, not on the base actually, to keep it from falling into the kill saw slots. See how well that worked out. So it being a solid piece and very simple meant that our wedge game was probably, our fork game was probably at its peak. And in terms of durability, we could take it right on the nose and continue being functional. And for those first few hits, we wanted to see how that went. And I think that although they did hit the forks, it held together, retained its shape. It was a good angle for us. We bounced off, basically. We were almost tangent with the floor, so like we just repelled each other backwards. It was really good. So when we actually got around to slowing down the drum, we could make that maneuver to scoop underneath them. The old design might have been completely plastered and would have lost all of its wedge effectiveness. The other thing for durability, which is probably one of the bigger hits of the match that flipped us over, a big focus was actually into those two front corners. We noticed in the previous seasons, those two front corners are the ones that get hit the most. And it's because of the maneuvers that we perform. If it's not on the forks, or if it's not, somewhere totally undesirable because of lack of control, it's those front corners. So we added onto there what we call the cheeks, and these large, thick pieces of UHMW, a nod to, of course, the Shatter team, is they're famous for their bladed armor. And we did that on the front, those two front corners, which also helps simplify the geometry of that front part. So I actually have here some nice little demo pieces, which will actually be on eBay at some point. So this is actually this is the front corner, the robot right side, that was hit by Minotaur. And so you can see the size of the drum was way wider than the piece, but for UHMW, it simply just hit here. You can see that the tooth carved it out. A big chunk of it is somewhere in the scrapyard by now, but it took the hit, and the steel behind it was a-okay. The robot flipped over, so it was maybe not as ablative as we were hoping, but Minotaur did get a really good bite on that, and we minimized the damage to just this piece. Of course, we had a few of them, so we were able to replace this, and that was a fantastic upgrade as well. We were able to self-right quickly and get back into the fight.
Yeah, I mean, like not much else you can say about it. It was a a fantastic match. Obviously, the way that you would want to start the season. Um, After that, you got Mad Catter, which is a very fun team. I mean, Martin Mason, like I don't know that anybody has that level of personality. um, it's so funny because towards the beginning of the match, Kenny Florian said that once Sawblaze gets underneath you, you're in big time trouble. And I don't think that you could illustrate that better than what happened in that match, essentially, like collectively. It really had everything. I mean, at one point, the mini bot was smoking in the corner. Um, it was just crazy. Um, you ended up getting a knockout, obviously, in that one, which it didn't happen often in the season, which is, kind of strange just because Sawblaze had such knockout power, but that was just, it was an epic match. So, kind of talk about that one.
It was, yeah, that one. Mad Catter of old, you don't think too much about them in the previous seasons, but in the more recent seasons, then when they've been focusing heavily into that vertical spinner, it has a lot of power behind it. And in their first fight against Yeti, I mean, we're just like, I think the whole field was, I think Mad Catter is a really serious contender this time around. You know, they built a new robot. Of course, their driver Calvin Yuba is well known for being fantastic in all weight classes, really. And so when you put a great machine and a great driver together, you get a really nasty combination. And so Mad Catter, we got the announcement for that one, especially in the main event. You know what the producers are thinking, and they're thinking that this is going to be, it's going to be a challenge fight for sure. Um, they recognize that Mad Catter is rising in the ranks, and so what they kind of see is like, we just got off the win off Minotaur, and they want to challenge us, and we want to challenge them at the same time. So like Mad Catter could be the rising star of this season, and so we got that matchup, and they have a lot of different tactics that they can employ. The thing that actually got me personally the most worried was how their mini bot was going to come into play. And you might be thinking, oh, the mini bot's usually not a problem. Their mini bot, I forgot what they called it. Gassy Cat is one version. They have another version which, without the flamethrowers, kind of more of a pusher, a doorstop, so to speak, has a lot of magnetic sticking power to the floor and a very strong drivetrain. You can actually push heavyweights around. So we're worried about losing our ground contact. So our drivability is what keeps us able to position well against the opponent. If we lose that ability, then Mad Catter can definitely get a good hit on us. So we're worried about our ability to dodge the mini bot. So actually, like whenever the opportunity arose to actually take it out, hit it with the blade backwards. That was a key part of the strategy to remove the other robot so we can focus solely on the main robot. And the main robot, of course, is a hard hitter as well. Uh, it was a very close back and forth fight, actually. So while it looked like we had a lot of the control, we were probably racking up on damage fairly equally. One of the hits that we delivered nearby the pulverizer, again, to the power of Mad Catter's weapon, trying to use the pulverizer. My teammate Shakyu operates the hammers. He knows what to do. We got Mad Catter close by. He hammers down onto their blade, and the blade powers through, even though this 100-pound hammer is resting on top of it. The blade powers through. It's continuing to spin. We're hoping to stop it so we can get a good hit. Um, Incredible power by Mad Catter. We end up doing kind of this dual exchange in that corner. So actually, when I fire the arm, we hit underneath their lifter. Underneath their lifter is the controller for the lifter, which we took that out. So their arm was stuck in the air the entire time, which is the reason why they couldn't self-right and we got the knockout. But that same hit actually chopped the nut from the weapon shaft. So actually our weapon assembly is starting to like open up over time. And let's say worst case scenario, if we're doing too many crazy things, the whole thing just pops open like a banana peel or something. So it was we didn't notice it until looking at it later. It's like something feels a little slow when we're watching the performance. So we were kind of like racking up damage on each other the entire time. Uh, Flipping them over was ultimately what did them in because they couldn't drive anymore. Uh, and that was probably the biggest relief. I didn't even know that their arm wasn't working, and so we're just keeping that on their aggression. We got a shot in the underbelly as well, but it turns out it was necessary.
Yeah, it's so funny because like that match in particular, it seemed really like spirited. I heard, even a little bit of trash talk going on during that, and it was just fun. I mean, I was kind of like laughing at some of the time because it was a fun match.
That's anxiety leaving the body.
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, 2-0 record, it's what I would have expected. I mean, up to that point, like I was like, Sawblaze is gonna win. Like this is absolutely Sawblaze's year. Interestingly enough, you ended up going against Endgame, the previous year's champion. Um, for me, I think it was both a battle of the forks in that match and also a battle for the number one seed because I mean, you don't really know what's going to happen, but I felt very strongly whoever won that was going to end up being the number one seed in the tournament. Um, Coincidentally enough, you beat them back in 2018. Obviously, a different end game, a different Sawblaze at that time. But this match in particular didn't last very long. I mean, I don't want to like not give them credit, but you ended up out of the arena in like a weird fluke kind of thing that just never happens. You hardly ever see that. At least I haven't really seen that. And I don't think that even they wanted it to go that way. Like, obviously, they wanted to win, but I don't think that they wanted to win like that. And I don't think any team really wants that because that competitive spirit, you want to go toe to toe, try and go the full 3 minutes and see what happens. Um, can you talk more about like what did happen and what you think might have gone differently if they hadn't booted you out like almost immediately?
Well, I know that was actually a pretty those that zone in particular is always a pretty hot topic. So there's actually some debate preseason whether as to that area was going to be allowable or not. Uh, it's part of the arena design, is true, and it's actually the entry doors, of course. So that's where we load the robots in, and so by the design of the arena, there's kind of this dead zone, which is there, and they discourage people from launching robots into that corner. That's for because they don't have the additional guards there that are rigidly fixed normally because it's a moving panel, so they can wheel the robots in. So there's actually a sort of a ruling that was heavily debated that robots put intentionally into that corner were a disqualification by the other team. Um, Obviously, there's some teams which are strongly have stronger opinions than others because they can utilize that zone. And you know, I don't know if I want to say people want to win that way or don't want to win that way, but uh, to say that you would be automatically disqualified is strange. So it was ended up being allowable unless it was an egregious, obvious attempt to do so. And so uh, many times in the season when that did occur, uh, teams were not necessarily celebrating; they were confused and almost fearful that they're going to get disqualified for it for the interpretation that it was intentional or not. Like I recall in particular, Will Bales knocking someone out. I don't remember which opponent. And instead of going like "Yay," he was like, "Uh oh, what did we just do that?" Um, Endgame in particular. So going back to this fight, I don't think I think they would have liked a more fun match. I don't think they were unhappy that it happened this way because they show us a lot of respect into what how they set up, and I think that shows that they acknowledge the strength of Sawblaze. They armored up on top. They have these special forks, basically just for us, designed specifically to exploit certain design features on our robot, and that's really what did it for them, I think. So it's because of how they tooled up for this one that was very difficult for us. So strategy wise, and this is some design philosophy in my opinion, there's different levels of advantages in combat robotics. The number one is always going to be design advantages because design advantages, some features which are innate in the robot and how the two opponents interact, will always give a favorable interaction. And that, of course, depends usually on driver skill. So implementation, what you do in the arena. And if you were to try and, let's say you have something that requires you to drive or position in such a way, you could potentially compensate for design flaw or feature or what have you by really good driving. But if the other person is also a good driver, the design feature will always win. So just by nature of endgame's forks and their strategy drastically simplified to pointing and shooting is an immense disadvantage for us. And so there's a lot of They kept it under wraps, of course, as everyone seems to do. And it's so we weren't able to strategize until basically we're in line. And so that was very difficult to try and think about what we would try and do. What what can our robot do relative to theirs to even compensate for something like that? Uh, we tried to do this maneuver where we would actually try to approach from the corners instead of head on. Head on is kind of a death sentence. So we tried to use our forks and their forks, understanding that they're much flimsier than ours, try to approach at an angle which we can deflect them. And so you can see if you were to watch it in slow replay that how the forks interact is actually pretty interesting. Um, we actually approached, in a way, and I watched this many times, where we actually kind of get underneath each other and we bounce. We bounce off each other, which created a separation. So that when we swung, we missed them. So the first collision, we bump off the corner, and then I try to turn to use our stiffer forks to move their robot. So we have greater leverage on their robot theoretically, and then we just miss. So that just makes it all super terrible. Sawblaze again having one of the largest z-axis moment of inertia, being a really big robot with a lot of steel and stuff further out. The turning inertia is really big. So if you oversteer, you are in a whole host of trouble. So they just, held back a little bit. We oversteered, and then they just went forward, and that's kind of really all there was to it. It's either the strategy is either going to work really well or it's going to work terribly. So work terribly. Um, that was compounded onto another thing. We were pre-stressed, so there's a lot of things which are not great about this fight. So when you made your comment about the battle for the number one seed, that is completely true, and that's how it was marketed to us. You guys are going to fight because we need to find out who's going to be number one. Now, this is in sort of a contrast. A funny story is um, robots will get different matchups. They want kind of like an on par fight. Depending how you do, you might get an easier one. The selection committee tries to even things out. You get something on your level, you get something above your level, and depending on where you started, you might get like a super challenge one because you're going up in the ranks. Uh, we asked to try to get our hard fight, whatever you think is hard, sooner because it's the summertime. It's a great time for weddings. My teammates are attending weddings during filming, so they need to leave. We're going to be shorthanded. So we're like, if you have to give us something hard, please do it sooner than later. And that was, supposedly our Mad Catter fight. So we were expecting to not have to fight a top tier robot like Endgame, and they had said something similar to Endgame as well. So then when we got the matchup, surprise, surprise, we're like, this isn't exactly what we bargained for, and we're short team members. So it was really stressful for us to not have our normal crew uh, because they had places they need to go. We're short-handed. This was out of the ordinary. You kind of mess up the jive a little bit. It's stressful. And then to make matters worse, a static issue in the pits. Uh, may have read multiple times from other teams that the plastic flooring and the low humidity they had in the pit area meant that static charge built up very quickly, very easily. I could walk between pit tables, so it's about maybe 8 to 10 feet or so. The tables are metal; they're like a stainless steel kind of wood food service table, and it has a ground potential. You walk one distance between pit tables. I put my hand close to the table, and then like this about 1 inch arc of lightning, purple lightning. I was like a Sith Lord, except that you don't really want that. Forms, and that's terrible for your electronics, depending on how you design it. This is something that we've never had to deal with before in all the seasons of BattleBots. Something in our robot died. We usually have the way the production goes is you get ready, you put the battery in the battery tent, you do a weigh-in and then a functional check, and then you get in line because, of course, for TV and show sake, they want to queue all the robots so they're ready and that we don't have to wait for very strange things to happen. except that they queued us up very, very early in the day, so we were there for a few hours, and the robot's sitting inside the battery tent, which is the same flooring material as the pit area. Sawblaze also being in the front row in terms of battery tent stuff means a lot of people passed by, and people's hands will move around. Maybe someone got too close. I don't know. Maybe one of my teammates got too close. In any case, somewhere between the robot doing its functional test and working completely, and the first time we loaded in, people who were at the live viewing will know this. Sawblaze loaded in twice because the first time the weapon did not spin. And that was, I mean, we're not going to fight endgame without the weapon. That's just a cakewalk for them. We lose all of our threat potential. Uh, so we had, because we were main event, usually later in the day, we had maybe like an hour or so to do this. And Sawblaze is not designed to be short order service like that, not in the electronics. So by the end of it, by all the stressful servicing of the robot, it finally worked. But we were exhausted. We were exhausted, frustrated, and all sorts of things. It was a terrible time, a terrible setup. By the time that the match concluded in the way that we did, we were disappointed and also relieved. We're just like, I just want to go to sleep. That was terrible. Um, I think in better circumstances where we had all of our crew, where we were fully rested, comfortable, and not frazzled, would give them a different game. And I think that it will be much more challenging for them. Not hard to make a statement like that after that fight. But a lot of things
Yeah.
are working against us.
Yeah. So, I mean, if any of the BattleBots folks are watching, there needs to be a rematch.
No, 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 I didn't say that.
No, no, I mean for me, there
Okay.
needs to be a rematch. I need to see what actually happens. Um, yeah. So we'll see if that comes to play. Um, but yeah, so going into the tournament, 2-1, but I mean, really having that loss be to Endgame, I don't think that there's anything overly bad about that. I'm gonna kind of talk about the hijinks and P1 fights collectively, just because they were very similar in a lot of ways. I mean, they both ended in the same result, win via judge's decision, and um, you pretty much dominated both matches. I think the big difference was that P1 really made sure that they had extra armor to avoid too much going wrong, because I think without that extra armor, you probably cut right through them and that match doesn't go 3 minutes. Hijinks had some parts that kind of fell out, and the things that came off, but they still were able to operate for the whole time. Um, kind of talk about those two matches and what how you felt coming away from those.
Yeah, so those fights, so in the background, and maybe the way the end game fight ended may have been a blessing in some ways. So our first two fights, we're starting to expend a lot of our weapon hardware because the robot, it always seems to just, it hits hard. It hits hard. We hit them hard, and we also hit ourselves. The energy which is used to cause damage, goes to our chassis, our weapon system as well. And so for those, we were actually worried that we're going to run out of parts. The first two fights, we end up damaging components which we have in our weapon system that we prepared a certain number of spares for, but we don't expect that when we win, we're going to damage them as well. So it was kind of interesting that we're trying to find ways to work with our local suppliers, with our sponsors, to see if we can get parts made very quickly. And luckily, one of our sponsors, Southwest Plastics, was able to make new pulleys very quickly during kind of one of the weekend breaks when one of my teammates had to go home for a bit. He brought back with him more spare parts, which is fantastic. So thank you very much to them. The end game fight ending as quick as it did no damage to our weapon system. Okay, great. Um, the hijinks and P1 fights, if we are in a position where we feel like we can win without having to overexert ourselves, we're going to take it. So, you know, getting a knockout is great, but when you're in the tournament, it doesn't matter. So that would be overexerting ourselves for a kind of statistic metric that we don't really need. And I'm sure that our opponents would also appreciate if we feel like we're in that position to not totally trash them. Although like hijinks, I kind of feel a little bit bad. The motor came out and everything. But once we were sure that we were probably going to win on like damage, aggression, control, like when they start losing functions, you can start to ease off a little bit if you're confident to not hurt the robot too much. So for the hijinks fight, uh, them losing their drive and losing part of the tail, which is responsible for the stability of their weapon. If they have a hard time spinning up, the weapon bar, which is incredibly destructive, it has so much potential, is really decreased there. They can't spin up as easily. It's a lot slower. It's not maneuverable. We can kind of pick and choose our shots. So after a few power shots at the beginning, we turned the weapon down to its like 40% or so, and just went in for enough hits to show that we had aggression. But otherwise, we're looking for their cue if they wanted to keep going or not. So if they kept spinning up and kind of driving around, we went in there for a few more love taps. As I've read the feedback, like, why are you doing this? Like, well, they kind of choose if they want to keep going. The Kraken match earlier, where Matt had believed that they were going to be incapacitated, he backed off, and hijinks spun up to full speed. Uh, it's that when you're not quite sure what your opponent is thinking, you can only go off of the cues that you have available to make the decisions you need to. So unless they're banging on the glass or they're putting their controller down, I assume that they're gonna want to continue to fight. So we just went in there. If they're trying to spin up, we would tap with the wedge, slow down the blade, give them another love smack, then back out. Uh, Similar for the P1 fight, the first engagement that we got was luckily one that was critical. So we hit them right where their sort of chain system went to both wheels, which slowed down severely one side of their drive. P1 being a front flipper, a control bot, really needs that maneuverability. So I sympathize with them because without having that consistent control, uh, we also we recognize that and said we can pull back a little bit. We can win on we've won on damage because they obviously can't drive straight. Control and aggression, we can take that as well because it's hard for them to engage. So just backing off, playing it methodically. We're looking at going deep in the tournament, so we need to be smart about it.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously you could know, who you were going to fight next anyways. I would say that next match against Riptide, even though they're a rookie bot, when you look at what they had done to that point, out of 5 matches, getting 4 KOs, I definitely don't think that they were one to just like look at and say, oh, this is going to be easy, because they're very solid. Um, you really went right at them, and you ended up getting them on their side. There was a little bit of back and forth. They maybe got 1 or 2 shots in, so it wasn't 100% domination. But once they were on their side, they were done. Um, what was your plan going against them? Probably not having a whole lot to look at, because they are a rookie, so there's not like years of matches to look back on with them.
Yeah, that's true. But we've seen robots of very similar styles in other competitions. So, we're able to look at that data as well to find out how a robot of that style would sort of interact. Um, yeah, leading up to that one, the two opponents that it could have been, both very destructive. Uh, we obviously know Uppercut very well. Alex Satori, we fought before, and my protege, he's fantastic, and the robot only gets better. Uh, Riptide being a new robot from also a relatively new builder, but has also seen early success in his other competitions that he's competed in, including NHRL. Uh, we've seen what they can do to other opponents. The Shatter fight was a surprise to me. I thought that Adam and his team and his experience fighting similar robots, I thought they were going to win that. And then they they fought Uppercut and they beat them handedly. And I was also surprised. I was like, okay, all right, all right. And the earlier fights, like Duck, a indestructible robot, one of the most durable robots of the entire field. I've never seen Duck take that much damage before. They have such amazing bite with the weapon. It does so much damage. Uh, but we did fight Minotaur. So that strategy did not deviate too much from what we had already experienced. We had faith in the durability design. And so I told my team, I said, this is gonna either work really well, or we're gonna have to, you know, we're gonna have to put on the fancy shoes or something. So we decided to go straight on, straight on, and then trust the upgrades to our durability, to our the forks and the angles. And I don't think anyone expected uh, Riptide to flip end over end so high. I mean, they went over our robot. I don't know. I can't recall. Maybe like 8 feet up or something. And we were actually worried at that point, like, oh, keep going forward because he's gonna land on you if you stay still. So we just passed all the way through him. And so after that, we're just trying to get into a good position so we can land a good shot. Riptide has armor, but so much of it goes into the weapon, so much of that weight goes into the weapon. The armor is maybe not super thick. And seeing as how we did so much damage to Minotaur, who's half-inch aluminum top and bottom plates, we could probably do Riptide a lot of damage, especially on the underside. So we tried to engage onto them a way where they're inverted to get them. They're able to flip over, luckily, and we got a shot on their wheel, which slowed them down a little bit, but ultimately did them in. Again, this is trying to play it strategically, trying to play it smart because we're in the tournament. One of the hits bounced off our forks in such a way that they just kind of landed on their side in such a way that the weapon didn't have enough acceleration to really twist the robot to spin them back down. Their wheels couldn't touch, and they didn't equip the arms. They had lifting arms in their initial proposal. Uh, they had those unequipped because they wanted the more strategic advantage with the weapon. Put more effort into that. That might have been able to save them there, but when you see an opportunity like that, it's just kind of golden for us. Um, we don't need to attack them more to move on from that fight. So we took it. It wasn't a fantastic win. It didn't feel very strong. I feel like they may have defeated themselves. But again, this is the tournament, uh, and we've thus far done pretty well with preserving the machine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so that, at that point, then you're essentially in the semifinals versus Witch Doctor. Um, Interesting thing about that, I mean, looking back through the history, I mean, you have some history with them. They beat you one time, you beat them one time. So I mean, I'm sure that you're plenty familiar with them. I also think that that was an interesting match because for them, they were coming out of what was considered a very controversial match against Minotaur, and I'm sure that was maybe for them they felt like they had to have a really solid, convincing win going into the finals. I mean, who knows? I haven't talked to them about that, obviously, but um, no one like the whole season obviously kind of took it to Sawblaze the way that they did. And I mean, unfortunately, that just I think stemmed from the fact that they happened to catch a wheel, and that I'm sure limits your ability to do a lot of things once that happens. Kind of take me through what happened there from your perspective.
Uh, yeah, I think that Witch Doctor is really looking for an opportunity to prove that they belonged in the position that they were. Uh, a lot. I've read Reddit, so I'm kind of familiar with some of those comments that have been made. The glitch substitution was a thing. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, Witch Doctor, they got a freebie or something." And then the controversy with Minotaur and the unstick, that was complicated as well. But Witch Doctor, the team, they're experienced robot fighters as well, and they're technically not doing anything wrong. So I was, they had a lot to prove. This true, but I'm sure they're not super frazzled by it. They want to win just as much as any other season where they've competed. The robot is good despite the seeding. It's a great robot, and yeah, we have that nice little one-to-one there. They made changes based on the result of last season as well. And so I think that they end up doing really well with it. So one of the things that they had changed is they put on a different kind of blade because they noticed how easily we were able to basically hit their belts, you know, by design of their dual disc blades and how we have our fork set up, we kind of hit directly in the middle, and so they lost a lot of their belts last season. It was a little bit of attrition for our win in season 5. Season 6 was just sloppy. Nothing really more to comment on that. It's just sloppy driving. So
Yeah, I mean, it happens, and like you said, as far as like Witch Doctor goes, they have a really amazing robot. I mean, I think just for me as a fan, it was hard watching both of my favorite teams lose in back-to-back matches against them, but nothing to take away from the robot that they have. And even, you know, the whole thing going up against Mammoth versus Lich, like Mammoth is an amazing robot as well. So that was not a cakewalk match by any means. So, obviously not, in the end, not the way that you would hope things worked out. I mean, I'm curious at that point, were you even thinking ahead to Tantrum? Because you faced Tantrum before as well. I mean, were you thinking ahead, or are you just someone who really wants to focus on the match at hand and doesn't want to think about that next step at all?
yeah, thinking about the next step, although we had Tantrum in mind, of course, because they beat us in the previous season. So we were thinking about them before we knew how the tournament structure was going to go. But yeah, we're typically not the kind to think one fight ahead, because it's hubris will get you. Uh, Witch Doctor, they made a lot of upgrades, and they didn't get to test them per se. I think that season 5 Witch Doctor, if they got a good shot, could have easily done the same thing. So I don't think they had a chance to exercise all of their upgrades against us, and that's maybe to our advantage this season. So we'll just find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're definitely known as someone who like really takes those lessons from, the seasons past and the matches and things like that. Is there anything specific that you can talk about that you've worked on, for the next season as far as Sawblaze goes? Because I think that you're always trying to improve, despite the fact that you have an amazing robot. But, is there anything specific that you're trying to do differently, to maybe just be better?
hmm Yeah, I mean, one thing is, um, so we're again working more on the durability of the robot. So maybe an extension of those side pieces, we're trying to think about if we can buy ourselves another, like, free hit on that in the area would benefit us. We are experimenting with alternate wheel ideas, ways that we can kind of keep everything interconnected, so that we don't necessarily lose the entire piece. The piece for the Witch Doctor wheel is actually a very impressive piece, because the design of the tire is normally for sort of a blunt impact for most of the spinners, actually ends up just kind of denting or deforming it. But when you have a bladed object like the Witch Doctor blade, it was at whatever speed or whatever they were using, was just enough to actually to hook the bead. If you're familiar with the construction of car tires, they have a steel bead for the pneumatic ones. So the airless pneumatic ones actually have the steel bead which runs around the inside edge uh, of the tire, and that's responsible for a lot of kind of the grip onto the wheels when you do the when you inflate the wheel, and like it pops over into a ridge that's on the design of the wheel. That's that tight band of steel which keeps it connected, so you have a good seal for the air, and also transmits a lot of the torque. So that's a really thick steel uh, bead over there. It's braided about quarter-inch steel cable essentially. It goes around the whole thing. Normally very tough. It would be very difficult for most robots to kind of to 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 grab it and tear at it. Witch Doctor's blade actually hooked the inside of that, so it's two beads, one on the outside, one on the inside. They grabbed that one. You could see the damage done to it is actually elongation. So they hooked the inside of it and kind of stretched it wide, and that force, that connection to the wheel, actually what failed is it ripped at the base. So where the wheel, which is aluminum, spun aluminum, it's a go-kart tire, connects to the hub, it actually just kind of ripped it out. And actually, I have that piece sitting right. I actually have the wheel too. Honestly, there's a lot of parts here. These will all go on eBay eventually. So this is the wheel here. So there are a lot of the threads. The holes are still here. The threads are ripped out. So this is what actually mounts onto the gear motor over here. Uh, and these features are they just tore the bolts out with the whole wheel. So what actually is pretty incredible is you have to have the right weapon design, you have to have the right geometry, you have to hit it in the right spot, and it was just all perfect for them. Uh, and it was really just a really bad, unexpected situation for us. They also got kind of three hits in quick uh, quick pattern there. So yeah, pretty unlucky. First hit probably would have been fine to drive on it. Second hit, all right, whatever. And the third hit is just is completely gone. So things that don't happen usually can happen, and you just have to do your best to prepare for it.
That is absolutely true. Now I have an interesting question that, like, for me, for like to ask you, this is interesting because Sawblaze has been around for such a long time, and you fought, a lot of the robots that are out there. But is there anybody that you haven't fought that you would really like to have a match against?
Anyone we haven't fought that we'd like to have a match against? Yeah, I do think that we fought most everybody. I think that I think Black Dragon could be fun, seeing as how we both kind of share this dragon motif, and we have flamethrowers. It could be a fun fight. Um, let's see, who else? Who else? People we have not fought yet. Wow, we fought so many people. Who haven't we fought yet? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
We'll see what
you
the
haven't
selection
fought
committee
Glitch.
does.
How do you feel about that? Because like, I actually just talked to Glitch, and they're a pretty exciting rookie bot. I what do you think about that one?
I'd like to see if they are able to solve a lot of the issues that they had being a rookie team, and some of their mobility wasn't totally consistent. I think they could be a serious contender for sure. The weapon definitely hits very hard. Um, it would be very interesting to see what they do and how they move, and with how they strategize against us. Our strategy for against them, I don't think changes too much from how we handle most vertical spinners. So I would look to see if they have anything interesting that they want to try employing. That their maneuverability is a big advantage for them, and we've never fought a robot of that style before.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, like, because just to throw out another interesting rookie bot that you didn't fight last season, Blip. Aaron Hill's been in the game for a while, obviously with Tantrum, but last season he was focusing more on that robot, which I mean, Blip's a really great flipper. He I think he always tends to build these really interesting robots with things that haven't been done before. But kind of what do you think about that one?
Aaron knows all my secrets now because he was on my pit crew for December. Um, Funny thing that he was telling me on the after season, it was since Tantrum fought before us in their fight against Hydra, so they knew already they were going to the finals. And Aaron was telling me that he thinks that our improved forks would actually give them a lot of trouble. So he was nervous about if we had to fight Tantrum. He wasn't sure if the same strategy would work. By the way, it would not. So Should we have gotten a chance to fight in the finals, I think it would have been a lot more difficult for the Tantrum crew this time around. But if we were to fight with Flip, uh, yeah, he knows all my secrets. So, but I know a lot of his too because we're pretty open about that stuff. So, be interesting to see what happens. I know that what's under the hood of Flip is very agile and very powerful. So we'll see if our drive system can keep up with theirs when all of our cylinders are firing on all full.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we'll hopefully that'll be something that we get to see at some point. I actually want to shift a little bit and talk about the NHRL stuff, because that was something very new to me. And it was like just so fun to watch. And I didn't even realize the number of folks from BattleBots that are really involved in that, and it was really neat. And I have to say, like, Psycho is an impressive robot. Like, I want to see a heavyweight version of that, because kind of talk about NHRL and like your experience, especially this last time, because I mean you really had some success, and again, with you fighting Rio bots, I'm like, my heart, I can't deal with this.
Yeah, NHRL, for folks that don't know, stands for the Norwalk Havoc Robot League. And that was kind of born out of the idea that robot combat could be a sport and trying to get it popularized on a different channel other than TV. So the founder, like Austin McCord, put together the NHRL and had folks come over to one of his buildings over in Norwalk, Connecticut. And he focused primarily on 3-pound robots in the beginning, and has since, with increasing popularity, has expanded out to the 12s and the 30s as well. And he has a brand new building at 165 Water Street, very close to the original building, which is more or less dedicated completely permanently for robotic combat. So it's an incredible experience. He has maybe 5 or so arenas in there for the robots, 2 for the big ones, 3 for the beetles, and he has a robot museum in the front where he has a lot of the competitors and machines from across the world on display so you can really go up to them and admire the BattleBots scale machines in person. They're very cool. It's a very cool museum that he has there. The competitors themselves come from all across the world. This year, we've had folks from the UK for the first time, which was a wonderful treat. And even in twice now, 2 different competitions, we've had folks from Brazil, RioBots, and AGVS, which also helped out with RioBots in the BattleBots tournament this year. So we're starting to see international folks. That's the draw. That's the level of competition that NHRL brings. And you'll also see, as you had mentioned before, a lot of some of your favorites, active BattleBots and BattleBots competitors and their teammates. So very often represented at NHRL are folks from my team, Sawblaze. You see folks from Ribot, Bloodsport, Shatter, Mammoth. Ricky, of course, is a wonderful personality on the show. He's also competed there a few times as well. Oh man, I know I'm missing some. Tombstone, Perfect Phoenix have been there.
Evan
Minotaur, right?
Arias. Yeah.
Yes, Pain Train, huge. So if you go to NHRL, chances you're going to be able to see some of the folks you want to see, and it's we can be much more involved with the audience there, and it's kind of nice. One time that I recall, like I was just in line getting food for food trucks, and we spoke with families, kids, adults there, and while we're in line, it was great. I mean, we're just real people. We're just normal people as well. We love to fight robots, and we love BattleBots. Is how most of us got started. You ask half the people who are involved in BattleBots, and they say, I watched on Comedy Central, just like you said. I did that too. I can tell you the first fight I ever saw, and that's how I got into it. So we are all just fans of fighting robots. That's it. Real simple. Uh, NHRL is great. So they have a number of competitions throughout the year. I want to say it's like 5 or 6 uh, competitions spaced about approximately every 2 months, and the winners or the qualifiers will say top 4 per weight class per bracket makes it into this invitation only December event, which is the grand finals. And that's where they, the best of the best fight for the big prize money, which is also unheard of in the history of combat robotics for these weight classes. Absolutely unheard of, these awesome prizes and everything that is set up at NHRL.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed awesome. I mean, it kind of further cemented what I already know about BattleBots, is that, the community is amazing. Um, even just kind of starting out with this podcast, and, no, like, nobody knows who I am, even though I've been a fan for so long, but like, the community kind of being very welcoming and accepting of this has been great. Because I mean, I just love to talk about robots, and I'll talk about robots with anybody anytime that wants to do it. So it's just, it's fantastic. So yeah, and the Behind the Bots folks, they did an amazing job with the commentary, and especially like with Ricky being in there. Like, it was just a lot of fun. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up and called attention to it, because a lot of people don't know about it, and I think more people should.
Yeah, it's live streamed for free, so you can watch the uploads. They have it on their YouTube channel, so you can watch it anytime you want and see these robots fight. I mean, one thing that's really great, you see a lot of the builders from the TV show. They may build their own robot, and at minimum, it's good practice driving. So I do have a miniature Sawblaze. It's called Megatron, or Megaron is really what the name came from. And I also have robots in other weight classes. I just build so many different things. Oh yeah, reminding me, Aaron Hill was there as well with Blip, or not Blip, with Shifty, my bad. So I build a lot of different things. When you mentioned my new 12-pound robot Psycho is debut at this most recent Norwalk event, and I have been absent from the 12-pound weight class for maybe 4 or 5 years. I haven't competed in it since 2018 at a different event called Motorama, where I had a drum style robot that was lovingly obliterated by Alex Tori, as he seems to do that a lot. I got to build a new robot. It was fun, and I got to exercise build techniques and strategies that I don't normally do. Uh, it's a 4-wheel drive vertical drumette spinner built in a similar construction style as Witch Doctor, actually, with armor features inspired by Tantrum. So robots are therapeutic. This makes me feel good. I get to build cool robots inspired by other people's designs. You learn from them, you implement it, you internalize the lesson. Is how I like to build robots. Things that you learn as you go through your career or talking to other people need to be exercised to be internalized. So you build a lot of different stuff. You got to try it out. So new robot using parts I've never used before, built in styles that I don't normally do, and it was fantastic. I'm so jealous of everyone who gets to build a 4-wheel drive vertical spinner. This is like the easiest thing I've ever had to drive. I loved it.
Yeah, there you go.
I want to build one for the show now. No, I'm just kidding. Sawblaze is staying.
Well, I want Sawblaze to stay, but I wish that there was a way that, like, that you could have that too. Like, just do two of them, and that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, the team's discussed a few times about, we had the 2 robots, like a lot of teams are starting to do right now. But everyone wants to be on Sawblaze because it's just so cool. It's recognizable. They love the design. We love that. My team, we love each other. So we're just like, do we really want to split? Like, do you want to go over there? Like, no, I don't really want to do that. We want to stay together. So we talked about it a bunch. I think we're gonna stay all as one unit. So Team Sawblaze will be slashing and burning for the foreseeable future. Hopefully doing more of the slashing and all the burnings on the other guy.
Hopefully, and I don't think that we could end the show on a better note. That's perfect. So yeah, I mean, I am really excited for next season. I you know, every year I'm like, I hope this is Sawblaze's season because it's such a good robot. Like it deserves a giant nut. That has to happen, and we'll see what happens next season.
I mean, I wouldn't mind a golden bolt either, but
Or that, or and you never know. We don't know what happened, but we'll find out soon. So very excited for BattleBots Champions. Gonna have to wait, I'm sure, like who knows how long once the actual season happens before that's on TV. So it'll take a little bit of time, but yeah, thank you so much, Jamison, for coming on the show. So excited to talk about Sawblaze, and I'm sure that the fans will be excited to see this as well. So,
yeah.
um,
Actually, I think the golden bolt or the Sin City Slugfest begins August 4th, so it's right around the corner. Be very close to see how everything starts to shake out and who goes on to compete for the golden bolt tournament.
absolutely. So yeah, we'll see. As always, everybody that watches the show, I thank everyone that's subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, you should, because I have more amazing shows coming up that you really need to see. So please do that, like the page, all that good stuff. And we will see you next time on the show.